federal response teams closed in on the secluded compound located on a North California hillside, a property with no recorded ownership records. The deployment intensified minute by minute, with each team moving in a tight perimeter formation, locking down every approach. When the main door was breached, the compressed beam of white light flooded the interior space, revealing a deliberately configured layout designed to conceal criminal activity. The air was thick with chemical fumes and fine dust clinging to every wall seam, a sign that the location was used constantly but left no external trace. FBI forces began securing each room. Anti-tracking signs were present everywhere. Heat-resistant paint, double-layered walls, and a camera system wired into a hidden line. In a corner of the living room, a seemingly innocuous bookshelf began to shift when agents applied force at the correct lock point. It wasn't a simple manual mechanism but a revolving system designed to fool every superficial inspection. When the bookshelf opened fully, a narrow hallway appeared, with cold air blowing out from the thick concrete layer and tower lines running along both walls. The tunnel led directly down to the area deemed the operational center of the entire facility. Beneath the cement floor, ICE forces discovered a workstation packed with storage modules, along with an internal surveillance system showing signs of having been used just hours prior. Lying next to it was a row of latex gloves, empty medical supply boxes, and metal containers filled with drug residue. When the technical team opened a second locker, 10 kilograms of heroin were stacked into blocks, along with 5 9mm handguns that were loaded and wiped clean of prints. The next area was likened to an underground operational space. A ledger continuously tracked the movement schedule of goods, matching the cross-state transport routes that federal forces had been following for months. Right next to the workstation was a hard drive connected directly to an external surveillance system, providing a stream of incoming and outgoing images that bypassed any public server. Based on the structural design, the forces quickly realized this was not a secret hideout but a base serving command-level criminal operations. But the most serious discovery was behind a double-reinforced steel door. When the FBI activated the unlocking device, the back room was revealed with dim light, low temperature, and a floor covered in unclean dust. In the corner of the room, a young woman was chained to a wall-mounted anchor, exhausted but still responsive when the forces approached. She was immediately taken out to stabilize her condition. There were no signs of violence beyond what the investigation could disclose, but the conditions of confinement were enough to confirm this was prolonged unlawful detention. The presence of the victim in the locked room, coupled with the dense security system, confirmed what federal forces had suspected for months. This was not just the abuse of office to conceal minor infractions, but a criminal network operating right under the name of California Governor Victor Hawthorne. This secret house was not intended for his family or official duties but was a facility shielding operations he wanted to hide from all legal scrutiny. As the scene teams completed marking each area, the nature of the case became undeniable. This was the start of a large-scale operation, bigger than any political ethics investigation in the state. Every piece of evidence recovered in this house will pull at other layers of crime hidden within the network Hawthorne built over many years. And the moment the final steel door was sealed, the attack on the entire underground empire began its irreversible phase. Immediately after the secret house was completely secured, specialized teams moved all physical evidence, data drives, operational logs, and material traces to the Federal Command Center located in the outskirts of Los Angeles. Under the stable white lights, each piece of evidence was classified, coded, and entered into the system. And as the first data surfaced, the true scope of the network controlled by Governor Victor Hawthorne exceeded all initial predictions. It was no longer a question of personal misconduct or small-scale power abuse, but a criminal structure organized like an industry, operating long-term and protected by the highest echelons of power in the state of California. The first point in the data chain that caught the attention of federal forces was the system of shell companies. Financial investigation revealed that Hawthorne directly controlled 22 businesses registered across Los Angeles County and some surrounding areas. Ostensibly, they operated as bars, massage parlors, social clubs, or night entertainment centers. However, cash flow reports showed that 15 of them had no real business activity. All revenues and expenditures were adjusted using a simulated revenue model, while funds flowed into secondary accounts or were diverted to personal funds linked to the governor's associates. Digging deeper, ICE and HSI teams confirmed approximately 190 women had been brought into Hawthorne's system within 2 years. Many were transported from other states using fake medical documents. Others were brought across the border using fraudulent quarantine records. A predetermined route was established to ensure no local law enforcement inspection. This explained why missing persons reports in several neighboring states overlapped when cross-referenced with the personnel lists of Hawthorne's 22 businesses. But the most shocking part was found in the digital safe recovered in the tunnel. When the Federal Technical Division decrypted the first layer of security, more than 300 photos and 70 encrypted videos appeared, showing illegal interactions between Hawthorne and many young women. These were not just personal files but also served as a means of control and coercion, indicating the governor did not just protect the pipeline but was directly involved in the mechanism of forced dependency. Next was the drug pipeline. Aggregate data from the past 14 months provided clear figures. 680 kilograms of heroin passed through warehouses owned by the shell companies. 430 kilograms of methamphetamine distributed in small batches through night entertainment centers. 310,000 counterfeit fentanyl pills packaged in crates labeled as sanitation supplies, and $63.5 million circulated through money laundering accounts using intermediary companies to conceal the origin. Warehouses in the industrial area of South Los Angeles had previously been flagged by the Drug Enforcement Administration (DEA), but inspection orders were consistently canceled due for lack of legal grounds, which could only happen with direct state-level intervention. This confirmed the depth of the protective layer Hawthorne had built around his operation. From the testimony of former employees, a pattern was defined. Anyone who questioned licensing, inspection, or abnormal reporting was transferred, removed from their position, or forced to resign. Municipal licensing teams had tried to inspect 5 facilities but were blocked by directives from the governor's office. Local police in many areas received community contributions, which were in fact fees to avoid inspection. By this point, federal forces understood that the underground house was only one link in a larger network. Hawthorne wasn't just a flawed individual. He was the coordinating center of a multi-layered criminal system operating based on his political position. And with the evidence recovered, the decision to launch a comprehensive offensive operation was no longer an option but a necessity to prevent this empire from continuing its activities. When the data analysis reports were presented to the federal command table, the final image of the Hawthorne network was clear. A multi-layered criminal system, spanning beyond city limits, capable of neutralizing inspectors, manipulating local law enforcement, and shielding numerous drug transit routes. With this structure, any delay risked allowing critical contacts to flee, destroy evidence, or restructure the entire system. The next step had to be simultaneous action, and the order for a comprehensive attack was signed at 3:58 a.m. At the Federal Coordination Center near the Los Angeles Administrative District, representatives from the FBI, ICE, HSI, DEA, and U.S. Marshals simultaneously confirmed their targets. No unit operated independently, every plan was locked down according to the simultaneous multi-point no-time gap model. On the digital map, 19 locations were marked: underground spas, disguised nightclubs, warehouses, financial offices, night entertainment centers, and a secret casino. All were owned by Hawthorne's shell companies or had associated cash flow within the last 6 months. 4:10 a.m. California shifted operational status. The Operations Division deployed approximately 360 federal agents, divided into teams based on expertise. The FBI's Bearcat tactical vehicles left the secret staging area, while ICE and HSI teams fanned out across streets around Koreatown, Westlake, Hollywood, East LA, and the Vernon industrial area. The DEA positioned specialized forces at warehouses suspected of storing drugs and laundered money. All waited for the synchronized signal to launch the first assault. In Westlake, forces approached an underground spa considered one of the highest-risk locations for victims. When the breach team cut the door lock, the narrow space was immediately secured to control the hallway. 2 armed subjects barricaded themselves behind a side door, forcing the team to advance in a covered formation. The confrontation was brief but tense before the area was neutralized and 31 women were removed from locked rooms and transferred to the victim support team. Not far away, in the Hollywood area, a nightclub operating under the guise of a private entertainment room was hit hard by HSI from 2 directions. The interior structure showed this was not a normal facility but a personnel control point for the prostitution network. A group of guards attempted to flee the scene via a service staircase but were intercepted as forces closed in. During the search of a storage room, investigators recovered 12 kilograms of methamphetamine, $410,000 in cash, and numerous documents related to the distribution of personnel to other facilities. The DEA team in Vernon approached a warehouse adjacent to the industrial transport route. The roll-up door opened to reveal a loading structure converted into a sub-storage area. As they unloaded each pallet, forces discovered a lifting mechanism designed to hide goods beneath industrial cleaning supplies. Inside were 210,000 counterfeit fentanyl pills, along with nearly 28 kilograms of mixed drugs packaged and ready for transport. A group of subjects attempted to fight back from behind shelves but were quickly neutralized without serious injury. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshals approached the secret casino in East LA, the financial hub of the entire network. Security posts reacted quickly but were neutralized in a short time. After cutting the lock on the command room, forces found $3.2 million in cash, along with profit-sharing tables marked VH Prime, proving a direct link between this facility and the governor's office. The command center continuously received reports of secured, safe, and recovering evidence. In less than 1 hour, nearly all critical links in the network were struck down. The empire Hawthorne had maintained for years began to shatter, and the power vacuums in the system were opening up, preparing for the next step, dismantling the protection layer deep within the political center of the state of California. When the critical points across California were successively dismantled, another task more sensitive, riskier, and with a greater impact than any previous point of attack was activated in the Federal Command Center at 511 A.M. This was the order to infiltrate and arrest Governor Victor Hawthorne right inside the California State Capitol building, where he had wielded power for many years and where the potential for evidence destruction was highest. The Special Forces team was meticulously selected. The FBI handled anti-corruption, ICE and HSI controlled financial data, and the U.S. Marshals provided tactical personnel. The mission had 3 requirements: neutralize the target, secure all state-maintained servers, and prevent any attempt to dispose of documents. Even a small mistake could cause crucial leads to vanish from the system. 5:19 a.m. Unmarked vehicles moved into the tunnel leading to the Capitol parking garage. The gate security personnel identified the badges unusually fast. A marshal noticed a small warning light behind the duty desk, a signal implying someone had issued an internal alert to their superiors. The risk of information leakage was confirmed seconds later. The cameras on the 18th floor, the area of the governor's office, began looping, while the sound of document shredders echoed over the surveillance feed. Unable to wait for the elevators, the assault team was forced to choose the only route, climbing 19 flights of stairs, fully geared with armor, breaching tools, weapons and data storage devices. The pace was maintained at maximum effort, divided into 2 layers. The first layer dealt with any obstructions, and the second immediately secured abandoned documents and equipment along the way. On the 20th floor, the forces encountered 2 of Hawthorne's private security guards. Both possessed state-issued weapons but were not on the security duty roster for that day. When asked to drop their weapons, the 2 were uncooperative, forcing the agents to quickly neutralize them to avoid unnecessary injury. This was the first concrete evidence that Hawthorne had maintained a private security force inside the public building. When the team reached the governor's floor, the hallway outside the office was blocked with a series of desks and filing cabinets. Papers were scattered, and a few documents were half-burned on the floor, indicating a hurried attempt at destruction. An employee tried to explain that Hawthorne was in a private meeting, but the panicked demeanor and inconsistent information caused federal forces to immediately accelerate their advance. U.S. Marshals breached the first layer of obstruction, then the FBI placed a low-pressure breaching device on the main door of the governor's office. When the door burst open, the forces fanned out, locking down all movement of the person inside. Hawthorne stood behind the large desk, his jacket tossed over the chair, his tie loosened, and a metal bin containing smoldering papers. Still open on his desk was a financial spreadsheet listing 9 law enforcement officers, 5 inspectors, and 2 licensing managers receiving funds from his shadow fund. When asked to step aside for securing, Hawthorne reacted with accusations of federal overreach and California state autonomy, but his words were disjointed. As he was being handcuffed, the technical team immediately backed up all data on his personal server, froze system passwords, and seized peripheral devices that might contain evidence. Outside, state security teams began to gather around the area, but the arrest was completed before any response force could intervene. Hawthorne was escorted out of the office, passing through the hallway that was once the symbol of the power he controlled, and now became the final path before his entire underground empire was pushed to an irreversible collapse. The battle within the Capitol ended quicker than anticipated, but its impact spread instantly. It wasn't just the arrest of a governor. It was the shattering of the power protection layer that had shielded a criminal network spanning the entire state of California. When Victor Hawthorne was escorted out of the Capitol building, California immediately plunged into an unprecedented state of volatility. Within hours, all physical evidence recovered from the assault locations was transported to the federal evidence warehouse. Under the long white lights, the numbers began to align, forming a complete picture of the true scale of the criminal network the governor controlled. On 3 long tables, federal forces arranged the seized items by group. 65 kilograms of heroin recovered from multiple points, mainly in warehouses and transport vehicles. 240 kilograms of methamphetamine collected from nightclubs, underground spas, and external transport routes. 310,000 counterfeit fentanyl pills packaged in industrial cleaning supply crates. $10.8 million in cash. Separated from the casino, safes, transaction rooms, and transport bags. More than 190 victims were identified, many of whom had been out of contact with their families for months or years. These numbers, though neatly presented, clearly reflected the destructive power of the network. Not just drugs or prostitution, but a system of exploitation spanning multiple counties in California, operating smoothly thanks to the protection of the very head of the state's executive branch. As the victims were moved into emergency support areas, specialized teams began collecting testimonies. Most described similar travel routes, being moved through checkpoints where local police did not intervene, or being transferred through the back doors of night entertainment facilities that were regularly inspected but never found to have issues. Some testified that they had tried to seek help from patrol officers but were sent back with the instruction to wait for another team to handle it. Based on initial investigation steps, many safe routes were created by administrative directives, allowing the network's transport vehicles to pass easily. At the Capitol, the political shock spread almost immediately. State agencies that had operated stably for years suddenly descended into chaos as numerous documents were sealed, meeting rooms were closed for investigation, and all storage devices had to be secured. The legislature convened an emergency session to appoint an interim governor and simultaneously requested a federal audit of all programs Hawthorne had ever interfered with or funded. The media began to gather outside the building entrances, but all information was restricted. Meanwhile, in the surrounding residential areas, families of many victims gathered outside the Los Angeles police headquarters, carrying photos of missing loved ones. Some wept when their daughter's name appeared on the rescue list. Others still waited patiently, hoping for a real answer for the first time in years. These reactions reflected a social impact far beyond the scope of ordinary crime. The damage was not only to the victims but to the community that had placed its trust in the system meant to protect them. In the data analysis area, the specialized team began cross-referencing the servers seized from Hawthorne's office. Abnormal payment lines to the 9 law enforcement officers, 5 inspectors, and 2 licensing managers appeared repeatedly across multiple financial periods. This showed that the network did not just rely on the governor's abuse of office but was maintained by power links scattered throughout the administrative and security systems. Finally, the comprehensive report was transferred to the Federal Investigation Committee. One highlight emerged in the preliminary assessment. Hawthorne's criminal behavior could not have operated solely based on individual power. It required the consent, fear, or complicity of several individuals in the public service apparatus. This made the entire case not just the downfall of a governor but the shaking of a structure that had allowed him to stand firm for many years. As California stepped into the new morning, Hawthorne's network had lost most of its pillars, but the aftershocks continued to spread. The rescued individuals were stabilizing, while those still missing were being tracked. In the Capitol, departments shifted to emergency mode, pausing many projects, awaiting the final conclusion from the federal government. At this point, no one doubted, the matter wouldn't end here. It had just opened a power vacuum while also revealing that those who ran from the light would not wait for a new system to be established. They would seek to flee the state, erase their tracks, or restructure the network. And that was the signal for the next phase of the operation, hunting down the remaining pieces of this criminal empire. When the main evidence was inventoried and the first testimonies from victims were recorded, the Federal Analysis Division began processing the servers seized from the governor's office along with documents from the dismantled facilities. In just a few hours, the map of the Hawthorne network's operations expanded beyond California's borders, showing this was not just an underground empire within one state, but an interstate transport route deliberately built to move drugs, cash, and personnel through various transit points. The first data stream led to the area east of California, Shipping invoices hidden as payment for construction materials showed that 17 shipments had been sent to Arizona within 8 months. On paper, they were labeled as construction repair supplies, but cross-referencing with the Vernon warehouse schedule showed they matched precisely the times a large amount of drugs disappeared from California. The DEA argued that these shipments acted as an escape route when the network faced inspection pressure in Los Angeles. Concurrently, search warrants in Nevada revealed a secondary facility for the distribution system. A warehouse on the outskirts of Las Vegas, leased by a shell company in which Hawthorne held indirect shares, contained about 85 kilograms of methamphetamine in boxes labeled as industrial cleaner. The matching lot codes between Nevada and the computer list recovered in the tunnel confirmed this was a point for breaking down drugs before moving them into domestic transport routes. In Oregon, local security agencies coordinated with HSI to find 4 auxiliary facilities under the name of Express Transport Centers. Although their exterior operations seemed legitimate, accounting documents showed an abnormal amount of transportation costs, especially during the weeks when California tightened warehouse inspections. This mode of operation was designed to shift goods to states with looser controls before returning to California or being moved further. The final data point was Idaho, where funds from a fake charity managed by one of Hawthorne's associates flowed steadily. These transfers were not large but consistent, suggesting this was an additional money laundering area, not used for storage, but for cleaning a portion of the profits from the drug transport route. At the Federal Command Center, when the full-width map of the U.S. West Coast was hung up, dense red connections appeared linking California with Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, and Idaho. A conclusion was drawn. Hawthorne's network existed as a deep criminal corridor, using commercial transport structures as a shield, and dismantling the points in California had only destroyed the surface layer of the system. Given this situation, the federal government organized an emergency meeting between the regional directors of the FBI, ICE, HSI, and DEA. The joint report identified 3 main challenges. A portion of the network's key personnel had fled immediately after the capital was locked down. Shell companies in Nevada and Oregon were still operating, with the potential to destroy evidence at any time. Cash flow was moving slowly but steadily, indicating someone was still directing the network in Hawthorne's place. Therefore, a new force was established overnight, the Western Corridor Anti-Corruption Task Force, a unit merging personnel from 4 federal agencies and authorized to deploy across multiple states without waiting for supplementary approval. This force's mission included pursuing fugitives, freezing out-of-state warehouses, and isolating all remaining finances of the network. While the new task force began moving to neighboring states, California still had to handle the fallout. Many departments were temporarily freezing operations, pending a comprehensive audit. Suspected businesses were sealed, creating a small economic gap but having a strong impact on the community. Victims were transitioned to stable care, but many cases were unidentified because records were swapped when they were brought into the network. All these developments showed that the truth was no longer contained within the scope of a single state. Hawthorne's empire was not over. It had only lost its head. And as the center of power collapsed, those behind him began to vacate their positions, seeking an escape route. That was the signal for the campaign to enter its next phase, the phase of full-scale pursuit before the remaining links vanished into the interstate gap. When the final reports of the day were transferred to the Federal Command Center, the entire operation had crossed a new threshold. Victor Hawthorne was arrested. The main network in California was struck down, but data from the servers, victim testimonies, and interstate cash flow forced the federal forces to admit this was not a bust that ended when the leader fell, but the starting point of a larger purge. The protection layer around Hawthorne was once considered an impenetrable shield from officers taking administrative direction, inspectors being transferred, to office staff forced to comply with orders from above. When he fell, this layer lost its coordinating center, creating a dangerous vacuum. Some were seeking to hide, others were trying to destroy records or evade responsibility. Federal forces were compelled to deploy teams to secure remaining data in various public facilities before they could be wiped clean. At the victim support area, new testimonies continued to solidify the network's true structure. Many victims were constantly moved between states to avoid being located. Some were forced to sign fake documents to erase their identification traces. The sophistication of the operation showed that this network was not just based on the audacity of one individual but was the result of many years of accumulating power, manipulation, and selection of those willing to execute orders without question. In the capital, interim units began reviewing every contract, grant, and public program approved by Hawthorne. Many abnormal expenditures appeared, not too large to draw attention, but consistent enough to maintain an underground system. Legal teams proposed expanding the investigation to include non-profit organizations that had received funds from the governor's office. This put California into a state of stressful transition, having to maintain the stability of the administration while dismantling every remaining link. At the federal level, the Western Corridor Anti-Corruption Task Force began to assess the new situation. 3 key individuals, once considered Hawthorne's close aides, had disappeared within 36 hours of the governor's arrest. This signaled that the out-of-state transport routes still had coordinators. If not intercepted in time, they could re-establish the network under a new model or link up with organized crime groups in neighboring areas. Amidst all this volatility, one thing was agreed upon in the end-of-day report: the fight against the Hawthorne network was not over. The governor's collapse only exposed the surface of the system. Those behind him, the ones who used the names of state agencies to shield, facilitate, or abet, no longer had protection and would try every way to flee the danger zone. As the last lights dimmed in the command center, a federal commander asserted in a closed-door meeting, "This is just phase 2. Those who run from the light will leave a trail. And when they lose their shield of power, they'll make mistakes." The pursuit moved into a new chapter, no longer about taking down a governor, but about hunting down all the darkness that once believed its power could hide them.